Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The air in the Port Charles police station always carried a specific scent, a stale blend of stale coffee, industrial cleaner, and the faint, metallic tang of desperation. For Michael Corinthos, it was a familiar, almost comforting aroma, a reminder of the world he navigated daily, a world of clear lines and legal statutes. As the head of the Aurora media empire and a man deeply entrenched in the city's civic life, he often found himself at the precinct, liaising with Commissioner Anna Devane or Detective Dante Falconeri, his brother. Today, however, his visit was purely procedural, a follow-up on a minor corporate security matter that had required a police report. He was finishing his statement when he saw Ronnie, his head of security, leaning against a pillar near the entrance, talking animatedly on his phone. Ronnie was a recent but invaluable addition to his team. Former Special Forces, with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes that missed nothing, he had streamlined Aurora's security protocols and had become a trusted, steady presence. Michael gave him a brief nod, signaling he'd be just another minute. As he turned back to the desk sergeant, his own phone buzzed. It was a text from Willow, a picture of their youngest attempting to eat a fistful of spaghetti with chaotic, joyful results. A smile touched Michael's lips, the simple domestic bliss a stark contrast to the grim surroundings. In his moment of distraction, he didn't notice Ronnie end his call and slip his phone into his jacket pocket. Nor did he see the small, laminated card that tumbled out, fluttering silently to the scuffed linoleum floor behind the pillar. Michael finished his business, shook the sergeant's hand, and walked towards the exit. All set, Ronnie. Let's head back to the office. Right behind you, boss, Ronnie replied, his voice its usual gravelly calm. It was as Michael passed the pillar that a glint of light on plastic caught his eye. He glanced down, assuming it was a discarded ID badge or credit card. Habit, a legacy of being Sonny Corinthos' son, made him stoop to pick it up. It wasn't a credit card. It was a visitor's pass for the Port Charles Maximum Security Psychiatric Wing, the state-run facility for the city's most dangerously unstable criminals. The name on the pass was smudged, unreadable, but the date stamped on it was from the previous day. Michael frowned, turning the pass over in his hand. The psychiatric wing wasn't a place one visited casually. It housed individuals like Ryan Chamberlain, Heather Weber, and other figures from the darkest chapters of Port Charles history. Why would Ronnie have been there? He had no family in the area, and as far as Michael knew, his work history was entirely in private security and the military. Ronnie, you dropped this, Michael said, holding up the pass. For a fraction of a second, a crack appeared in Ronnie's impenetrable armor. His eyes, usually so focused and still, widened almost imperceptibly. A muscle in his jaw twitched. It was there and gone so quickly that Michael would have missed it if he hadn't spent his entire life reading the micro-expressions of dangerous men. The reaction was not one of simple annoyance at losing a pass, it was a flash of pure, unadulterated panic. Oh! Thanks, Michael, Ronnie said, his voice a little too tight as he plucked the pass from Michael's fingers and shoved it back into his pocket. My cousin. She works in admin over there. Had to drop off some paperwork for her. The explanation was plausible. It was even logical. But the panic Michael had seen was not. The lie was as clear to him as the sound of a slamming cell door. Ronnie didn't have a cousin in Port Charles. During his initial security vetting, he'd stated he had no living relatives. No problem, Michael said smoothly, his own internal alarms now blaring at a low, persistent hum. He clapped Ronnie on the shoulder, the picture of a trusting employer. Let's go. We've got that meeting with the European distributors at 3. The rest of the day passed in a blur of corporate strategy and financial projections, but Michael's mind was only half present. The other half was fixated on that fleeting look in Ronnie's eyes and the clumsy, immediate lie that followed. A visit to the psychiatric wing. It could be nothing. A secret relationship, an old army buddy who'd lost his way, a debt being paid. But Michael's life had been shaped by secrets. He knew the difference between a private embarrassment and a terrible, hidden truth. That evening, seated in his home office at the penthouse, the city lights twinkling below like a field of fallen stars, he couldn't shake the feeling. Willow noticed his preoccupation. "You've been quiet all night," she said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Is everything okay with the acquisition?" "It's not work," Michael said, covering her hand with his. He trusted Willow with his life, but he didn't want to voice his vague, paranoid suspicions just yet. They felt flimsy, unsupported. "Just something that happened at the station today." "Probably nothing." "With your family, probably nothing usually turns into the city is on fire," Willow remarked wryly, her nurse's pragmatism a grounding force in his often chaotic world. He smiled. "I know. I'm just being cautious. I'll look into it tomorrow, put my mind at ease." After Willow had gone to bed, Michael opened his laptop. He had the resources of a major media corporation at his fingertips, but he started small, respecting the line between employer and employee. He began with a simple search of visitor logs for the psychiatric wing. Of course, they weren't public. But Aurora Media had done several exposés on the conditions at state facilities over the years, and their lead investigative journalist, a dogged woman named Lydia, had cultivated sources everywhere. The next morning, he called her into his office. "Lydia, I need a discreet favor." No paper trail, no official requests. Lydia, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned forward. "My favorite kind." "What do you need?" "The Port Charles Psychiatric Wing. Visitor logs for the past week. I need to know if a man named Ronald Johnson visited anyone in the last 7 days." "Ronnie? Your security guy?" Lydia's eyebrows rose. "Is there a story here, Michael?" "No," Michael said firmly. "This is personal. And it stays between us. I just need to know who he was visiting." Lydia nodded, understanding the unspoken rules of their world. "I'll see what I can do." It took her 2 days. 2 days during which Michael watched Ronnie with a new, hyper-vigilant intensity. He noted nothing out of the ordinary. Ronnie was as professional, as efficient, as quietly intimidating as ever. He coordinated security for a high-profile charity gala Aurora was sponsoring. He briefed Michael on a potential threat from a disgruntled former employee. He was, by all observable metrics, the perfect head of security. But Michael saw the subtle tells now, the way Ronnie's eyes would dart towards Michael's office door when he thought no one was looking, the slight tension in his shoulders whenever Michael mentioned the police station or the state hospital in passing conversation. On the third morning, Lydia slipped a single, folded piece of paper onto Michael's desk while he was in a meeting with his board. When he returned, he found it, anonymous and damning. It was a photocopy of a log sheet. There, clearly printed, was Ronald Johnson's name, his driver's license number, and the date and time of his visit. But it was the name in the visitor 4 column that made the blood drain from Michael's face and the solid ground beneath his feet turn to quicksand. Inmate, Peter August. The name echoed in the silent, plush room like a gunshot. Peter August. The man who had terrorized their family for years. The man who had kidnapped Michael's infant son, Wiley, and swapped him with another child. The man responsible for a litany of crimes, including the attempted murder of his own mother, Liesel, and countless other acts of manipulation and violence. The man who was supposed to be dead. A cold, hard knot tightened in Michael's stomach. Peter August had died in a warehouse fire. There had been a body. It had been identified. The case was closed. The monster was gone. But the log sheet stated otherwise. His hands trembled as he picked up the phone, his first instinct to call Dante. But he stopped himself. This was too big, too explosive. If Peter was alive, and Ronnie was visiting him, the implications were catastrophic. Why? How? He needed more information before he brought in the police. He needed to understand the depth of the betrayal. He summoned Lydia back to his office, locking the door behind her. He showed her the paper. Her face, usually a mask of professional composure, paled. Peter August? Michael, this can't be right. He's dead. Apparently not, Michael said, his voice low and strained. I need you to go deeper, Lydia. I need everything. I need to know Ronnie's real connection to Peter. I need his service records, his financials, his phone records. I need to know if Ronald Johnson is even his real name. Use every source you have. This is no longer a personal favor. This is the biggest story of your career, and we need to break it before it breaks us. The full weight of Aurora Media's investigative machinery now swung into action. Over the next 48 hours, a horrifying picture began to emerge, pieced together from military databases, offshore bank accounts, and hushed conversations with terrified sources. Ronald Johnson was not his name. He was Ronald James, a highly decorated but psychologically unstable former soldier who had been dishonorably discharged after an incident involving the torture of a prisoner of war. After his discharge, he had vanished into the shadowy world of private military contractors. And during that time, he had been hired for a single, high-paying job, the personal protection of Peter August. The timeline was chilling. Ronnie had been on Peter's payroll during the height of his war against the Corinthos and Cassadine families. He wasn't just a random security hire, he was Peter's most loyal enforcer, his shadow. The fire that was supposed to have killed Peter? The investigation, Lydia's sources hinted, had been compromised. The body was a John Doe, planted to give Peter a way out. And Ronnie had been the architect of it all. He had faked Peter's death and smuggled him into the psychiatric wing, where he was being held under a false name, protected from his enemies and the justice system, hidden in plain sight. The final, devastating piece came from a forensic accountant. Large, regular payments were being siphoned from a dummy corporation directly into an account controlled by Ronnie. The payments had started just after Peter's death and were still active. Michael was not only employing the man who had helped his family's greatest enemy escape justice, he was quite possibly funding Peter's continued existence with Aurora Media's money, laundered through layers of shell companies. The revelation felt like a physical blow. Michael staggered to the window, gripping the sill until his knuckles were white. The trust, the confidence, the sense of safety he had felt with Ronnie, it had all been a grotesque lie. Ronnie hadn't been protecting him, he'd been infiltrating him. He had a front-row seat to every move Michael made, every conversation he had about family security, every plan to protect Wiley and Avery. He was a spy in the inner sanctum, a wolf guarding the henhouse. A torrent of nausea and rage washed over him. This was worse than any business rival, any straightforward enemy. This was a poison that had been drip-fed into his life for months. How many times had Ronnie stood outside Wiley's bedroom door? How many times had he driven Willow to the hospital? How many times had he been privy to Michael's most vulnerable moments, all while reporting back to the man who had tried to destroy them? He thought of the security protocols Ronnie had implemented. Were they designed to protect the family, or to create blind spots that Peter could exploit? The charity gala was in 2 days. Half the city would be there, including all of his family. Was that the moment? Was that when Peter would make his move, with his most loyal soldier already inside the perimeter? Michael's mind raced, shifting from betrayed employer to strategic commander. He couldn't confront Ronnie directly. The man was a trained killer, and a confrontation could trigger a violent, unpredictable reaction. He couldn't go to the police without absolute, irrefutable proof. The word of a journalist, even one as respected as Lydia, based on illegally obtained records, wouldn't be enough to hold a man like Ronnie, and it would certainly spook Peter into disappearing for good. He needed to see it for himself. He needed to look Peter August in the eye and know, without a shadow of a doubt, that the monster was still breathing. The plan formed with a cold, desperate clarity. Using a pretext about a sensitive, after-hours meeting with a confidential informant, Michael arranged for Ronnie to be on the other side of the city that evening. He then called in a favor from an old, unlikely source, Scott Baldwin. As a lawyer, Scott had visiting rights to the psychiatric wing for other clients and knew its labyrinthine bureaucracy better than anyone. "I need to get in to see a patient tonight, Scott." No questions asked. Scott, ever the opportunist, sensed the gravity in Michael's voice. "This is about Peter, isn't it? I always knew that Weasel didn't have the decency to die properly. It'll cost you." "Bill me," Michael said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. A few hours later, under the cover of a damp, misty night, Michael found himself being led by a nervous, well-paid orderly down a sterile, brightly lit corridor that smelled of antiseptic and despair. The muffled sounds of screaming and crying from behind reinforced steel doors was a chilling soundtrack. They stopped at a door marked solitary confinement, high risk. "He's in here," the orderly whispered, his keys jangling. 15 minutes. No more. And he's different. The drugs they have him on, they keep him placid, but the mind is still there. Michael nodded, his heart hammering against his ribs. The orderly unlocked the door and swung it open. The room was small, bare, and padded. A single, dim light bulb set behind a shatterproof cover cast a weak, yellowish glow. And there, seated on a cot bolted to the floor, was Peter August. He was thinner, his hair longer and grayer, his face gaunt. He wore a standard-issue jumpsuit. But the eyes, though clouded by medication, were the same. They held that same calculating, superior intelligence that Michael remembered with visceral hatred. Peter looked up slowly, as if the action required great effort. A slow, unnerving smile spread across his lips. It was the smile of a predator who had been waiting a very, very long time for this moment. "Michael Corinthos," Peter's voice was a dry rasp, but the smugness was undiminished. "I was wondering when you'd finally come. Ronnie said you were getting suspicious. I told him you were always smarter than your father gave you credit for." The confirmation, straight from the devil's mouth, was like a splash of ice water. All of it was true. Every last, terrible detail. "You're supposed to be dead," Michael said, his own voice dangerously quiet. "Death is so final," Peter replied, shifting on his cot. "And I had so much left to do. So many loose ends to tie up. You, your wife, your son, your father. My work isn't finished." "Ronnie works for me," Michael stated, needing to assert some control over the nightmare. "Does he?" Peter chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Or do you work for him? You pay his salary, you fund his operations, you give him access to your entire life. It's really quite elegant, don't you think? I get to watch my greatest enemy bankroll my resurrection. He's my eyes and ears, Michael. He tells me everything. How Wiley is doing in school. How lovely Willow looks these days. How you lie awake at night, worrying about keeping them safe from the monsters." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "You never thought to look for the monster in your own house." Rage, white-hot and blinding, surged through Michael. He took a step forward, his fists clenched. He wanted nothing more than to wrap his hands around Peter's throat and finish the job the fire was supposed to have done. Peter tooted, as if reading his mind. Think of the cameras. Assaulting a poor, mentally ill patient. What would the press say? What would your shareholders think? The noble Michael Corinthos, reduced to violence. No, you're not your father. You play by the rules. It's what makes you so predictable. Michael stood there, trembling with impotent fury. Peter was right. He was trapped. He couldn't touch him here without jeopardizing everything. This ends now, Peter, Michael growled. Does it? Peter leaned back, his smile widening. How? You'll fire Ronnie? He'll disappear, and I'll be transferred to another facility under another name before you can even get a warrant. You'll go to the police? With what? You illegally obtained those visitor logs. Anything you have is fruit of the poison tree. It'll be thrown out. And then I'll vanish again. You see, Michael, you've already lost. You walked into my web the day you hired him. The orderly opened the door. Time's up, Mr. Corinthos. Michael didn't move. His gaze was locked with Peter's, a silent war of wills in that sterile, horrible room. This isn't over, Michael vowed, his voice low and deadly. Oh, but it's only just beginning, Peter whispered as Michael was led away. Give my best to the family. Back in his car, parked in the shadows outside the hospital, Michael slammed his hands against the steering wheel, a raw, guttural scream of frustration tearing from his throat. The secret was no longer Ronnie's, it was his. A terrible, crushing burden. He knew the truth, but he was powerless to act conventionally. Peter had outmaneuvered him from his padded cell. He drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring through a film of unshed tears of rage. Willow was waiting up for him, her face etched with worry. "Michael? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." He looked at her, at the compassion and strength in her eyes, and he knew he had to tell her. He had to pull her into this nightmare, because the threat was to her, to their children, to their entire world. He led her to the sofa and, holding her hands tightly, he told her everything. The pass, the lie, the investigation, the visit. He watched as the color drained from her face, as her hand flew to her mouth in horror when he uttered the name Peter August. "He's alive," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And Ronnie, all this time?" "All this time," Michael confirmed, his voice hollow. "He knows our routines, Willow. He knows the security codes. He knows everything." The fear in her eyes was a knife in his heart. But then, as it always did, her fear solidified into a fierce, protective resolve. "What are we going to do?" Michael took a deep breath, the initial shock and rage cooling into a hardened, determined plan. He couldn't play by the rules. Not this time. Peter was right, he wasn't his father. But Sonny Corinthos knew how to fight a war like this. A shadow war. "We're not going to the police," Michael said, his voice now calm and steady. "Not yet. First, we're going to set a trap. We're going to use Ronnie's access against him. We're going to feed him false information, make him believe we're vulnerable. We're going to make Peter so confident that he makes a move. And when he does, we'll be waiting. We'll have him, and Ronnie, on our terms." He looked at Willow, his partner in everything. The battle lines were drawn. The terrible secret was out, and it had changed everything. The trusted protector was the ultimate threat, and the dead enemy was very much alive. The carefully constructed safety of their world had been an illusion, and now Michael was left with a chilling realization: to save his family, he would have to become as ruthless as the monsters hunting them. The war for their future had just begun, and the first shot had been fired not from a gun, but from a lie, hidden in a fallen security pass on a police station floor. The spoilers for their lives were now written in blood and betrayal, and Michael was the only one who could rewrite the ending. Michael Corinthos had been feeling something strange for weeks, a tension that seemed to wrap itself around the halls of Port Charles like a storm waiting to break. Ever since Ronnie Domestico reappeared in town, pretending to have changed his life and insisting that he'd left the past behind, Michael couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. The guy had a darkness about him that didn't just vanish overnight. Michael had seen enough of the underworld to recognize when someone was carrying a secret, and Ronnie's eyes gave him away every time they met. At first, Michael tried to brush it off. He had enough on his plate between running things for Sonny and trying to keep his relationship with Willow balanced after months of chaos. But then small things started happening, mysterious calls that Ronnie would take in private, random disappearances at odd hours, and that one night Michael saw him talking to someone down on the docks. When Ronnie noticed Michael watching, his entire demeanor shifted. That was the moment Michael knew this wasn't just paranoia, Ronnie was hiding something big. The next few days, Michael quietly started asking around. Brick didn't have much to say, only that Ronnie had been seen at Pier 55 several times late at night, meeting with a contact no one could identify. Dex had a bad feeling too. "It's like he's working both sides," Dex told him one night at Volanino's gym. "He's acting like he's got Sonny's back, but I've seen that look before. He's planning something." Michael wasn't sure yet what to believe, but his gut screamed danger. The old version of Ronnie, the one who used to work as a dirty cop and nearly got Sonny burned, was a man who thrived on secrets and blackmail. If he was back in town with some agenda, it wasn't good. Things came to a boiling point one evening when Michael went to check on the Corinthos shipment schedule. A file was missing. That file contained encrypted details about an upcoming transaction Sonny had planned through a legitimate company, information that was supposed to stay locked down tight. Michael confronted the warehouse manager, who swore only Ronnie had access to that file earlier that morning. When Michael found Ronnie later that night, the man was all charm and fake confidence. "You look stressed, kid," Ronnie said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You should take it easy. Leave the heavy lifting to the pros." Michael didn't bite. He just stared him down. "You been into files that aren't yours?" Ronnie's face didn't flinch, but his voice tightened. "You calling me a thief, Corinthos?" Michael held his stare. "I'm calling you something, but I'm not sure what yet." Ronnie laughed it off and walked away, but that moment sealed it for Michael. He was hiding something, and whatever it was, it could destroy everything Sonny had built. That night, Michael met with Dex again. "Follow him," he ordered. Quietly. "No mistakes." Dex didn't argue. Over the next 48 hours, Dex trailed Ronnie all over Port Charles. He met with a woman in an alley behind the hospital, then disappeared into an abandoned building near the edge of town. When Dex tried to get closer, the door was locked. He could hear voices, one of them was clearly Ronnie's, but the other sounded familiar. He couldn't place it. When Dex reported back, Michael's blood ran cold. "You're sure it was near the old factory?" he asked. "That place used to belong to one of Sonny's old partners before the feds shut it down." Dex nodded. "Yeah. And there's something else." When he came out, he was carrying a box. Looked heavy, metal case, maybe. Michael's instinct screamed that this was no coincidence. Ronnie had access to places no ordinary person could just walk into. He was tied to something bigger, maybe someone from Sonny's past. Or worse, someone from his own. Later that night, Michael couldn't sleep. He went through every possible angle. What would Ronnie gain by coming back? Money? Revenge? Or something more personal? He thought back to everything Ronnie had said since his return. He'd made too many references to unfinished business and cleaning up old messes. But whose mess? The next morning, Michael got his first real clue. Sam McCall came by his office with a serious look on her face. "I think you should see this," she said, handing him a photo. It was grainy, taken from surveillance outside the docks. Ronnie was in the shot, but standing next to him was someone Michael hadn't seen in years, a man Sonny once trusted who vanished after betraying him to the FBI. "Rafael Vega," Michael whispered. "He's supposed to be dead." Sam shook her head. "Looks like he's back, and Ronnie's working with him." Michael sat back, the realization sinking in like a weight. Ronnie wasn't just hiding a secret. He was part of a conspiracy that reached deep into Sonny's past, one that could bring down the entire Corinthos organization if the truth got out. And somewhere deep down, Michael feared the worst, that Ronnie's secret might not just be about business. It might be about family,